It is the middle of August and traffic on the lakes is dying down. A lot of anglers are starting to give up and get into other things, but you can still catch bass all day long by chasing the shade. Today we're going to talk about how you can still go out there and fish shallow and catch bass all day long, even when it's still mid-August and it's really, really hot out. You know, one thing that never ceases to amaze me, especially when you've got clear water and you can see, is how it may look like that the shoreline is completely empty, there's no bass there whatsoever, and then all of a sudden one comes out of nowhere and eats your lure. They are so good at hiding and disappearing even in skinny water. And lots of bass anglers, even in the summer, like to chase shallow bass. We spend a lot of time fishing out deep, drop shotting deep, all these types of things, but something about chasing bass in shallow water is so fun, and that's what we're going to focus on today. If you prefer to fish shallow water, even in the heat of summer, the best way to do it that I know of is to chase the shade all day long. And we know that low light periods are perfect for that, right? The sun is low in the sky early in the morning, late in the evening. Those are great times to catch bass. But as the kids get back to school and your life gets busy and things are picking up, you may not always be able to get up at 4 in the morning and go out, and sometimes you're stuck in that middle part of the day. So we're going to be talking about shade in the middle part of the day, and I mean shade that is like really tiny, you know, just a square foot of shade. So we need a couple lures that are excellent at fishing really tiny pockets of shade. And two of the best, I feel personally, are a popper, some sort of popping topwater, and then a weightless wacky rig. So let's go ahead and start with this popper first. We know that during the day, as that sun gets up there, the shade can get really small. And those bass, they will reposition and move and get into the tiniest pockets of shade. Maybe it is a pole that's on a dock, okay, a piling that's going down, and the shade's only this wide. They'll hang right there in that, or underneath a small dock, or brush will create a tiny little bit of shade, and those are the areas that we're going to talk about, because when that sun gets straight up like that, it just comes right down and the shade is almost minuscule. A popper is my #1 choice for fishing small pockets of shade, because you can leave it sit and sit and sit forever, and they'll be there underneath it and just see the profile of that bait. And as you know, if you've got a popper that has like a white belly in clear water, or maybe more of a darker solid color in dirty water, you're golden. It's a real simple setup, and you can just put that bait up in there and leave it sit, pop, sit, and you can work such a small area. This is just an excellent lure this time of year. And if you have got a popper that has some feathers on the back, oh, there's a small one, just took it right there. See, it was just sitting, might be a bluegill. That tells you how effective this is, though, is boom, it just instantly sits, and all species of fish like to come up and hit this thing. And I was in a tiny pocket of shade. But what I was saying is, with the feather on the back, if you have a feather on that tail hook, it just sits there in that water and just undulates and just moves back and forth with the current that is going through it, and it just looks so natural. So it is okay to leave a popper sit for a long time and work those areas. And bass, we know, we've talked about in other videos, they are such curious creatures. It would almost be disturbing to us if we saw how many times a fish comes up to it, looks at it, and then goes away. And not just a popper, but all lures. They'll look at it. They want to see what is going on. And if we can hold this thing in those shady areas a long time and just give it a twitch, it's so effective even when that sun is so high in the sky. And as far as another type of a popping lure that does a really good job, a popping frog. works nice. A lot of frogs are considered your walking frogs, but a popping frog is another excellent choice for this particular presentation. Now let's go ahead and talk about the other lure. My other favorite lure for fishing small pockets of shade all day long has got to be a weightless wacky rig. And let me tell you a story about a weightless wacky rig. So a summer or two ago, I was out fishing some deep water, moving down the bank, and I was catching some decent fish, and I come across this small boat of boys, probably, I don't know, somewhere between 9 and 12 years old, and there's like 3 or 4 of them in this boat, laughing, having an excellent time. And then I come around them and give them some room, and they said, "Hey, how you doing?" I said, "Oh, I'm catching a few, couple, 2-pounders here and there." They said, "Man, we are slamming the 5-pounders." Well, first thought that goes in my head, all bass anglers, we catch a 2-pounder. By the time we tell the story, it's a 4-pounder, right? So that's what I thought. Okay, yeah, were they really 5-pounders? But they were having a great time. I get back to the house that evening, and I was telling my youngest son about it, who was pretty sure he knew who some of these boys were. And he gets on his phone and gets on Instagram, and he says, "These kids right here," and I'll be darned if there wasn't photo after photo of these youngsters holding up 5-pound fish. They were just ripping them, doing exactly what we're talking about today, and they were doing it with a weightless wacky rig. I just smiled. I was like, boy, those boys really schooled me today for sure. So it works, it is effective, and one of the things that you have to be willing to do with the weightless wacky rig is really shoot it up into some pockets and into some shade. So you've got to be willing to go ahead and skip it. I like to give it a sideways skip, a pitch skip, and put that lure up in there and let it sink. And remember, your goal is to not move it towards the boat much. So let it sink, twitch, twitch, leave it sit, 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 twitch it a couple more times, and then go ahead and bring it in. You're fishing such a small area, you don't need to focus on a retrieve that comes all the way back to the boat. Target that, 3 by 4 inch place right there. Let it hit that shade and then move on to the next one. You're very, 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 very specific in your targets, which is kind of nice as an angler because you've eliminated the majority of the lake. So that's all that you're focusing on. And whether it's overhanging brush like we talked about, or it's a dock, just know that they will position and those bass will hold in those really, really tiny areas. And it's really satisfying to put that lure in the right place, know that it's just a small window and you make an accurate cast and boom, you feel your line take off. It's such an awesome feeling. If you'd like to check out another video that really talks about how sunlight can position fish, check this one out here. It's called Fishing the Transition Line. I think you'll find it interesting. And hey, don't forget to go out and encourage someone today. You never know how you might just change their life. For the Bass Fishing Life, I'm your host, Steve Rogers.